Beneath the flickering streetlight, Officer Grant flashed a sinister grin, slipping a bag of cocaine into Bianca's car, certain she'd collapse under his lies. But when she calmly pulled out a federal warrant with his name emblazoned on it, Grant's face drained of color, his world unraveling. In that moment, who was the true criminal, the woman he tried to frame, or the cop about to face justice? If this twist grips you, share it with others. Let's dive into the story together. The rain that night in Milford was merciless. Sheets of water came down as if the sky itself had cracked open, flooding the narrow streets and turning the small town into a place that felt abandoned, almost ghostly. The street lamps struggled to stay alive in the storm, their faint yellow glow flickering against the black curtain of rain. Every now and then, lightning cut across the sky, throwing sharp shadows over the houses, and the thunder rolled in like the growl of something ancient. Bianca Carter gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual. She was 34, a woman who carried herself with the calm presence of someone who had fought her way into a profession that wasn't built for her. A black lawyer in a town where power wore a white face and a badge. That day had been long, another battle in the courthouse, and her mind still replayed the arguments she had stood up against, the stares, the whispers. She was tired, bone-deep tired, but also alert in the way someone learns to be after too many years of watching the ground shift beneath their feet. The hum of her car was steady, comforting, even until a sudden flash of green and red light split the darkness behind her. She caught it in the rearview mirror first, and her chest tightened instantly. A patrol car moving fast, its siren muted, but its presence loud enough to make her heart beat faster. Bianca pulled to the side of the slick, empty road, her tires hissing against the wet pavement. The rain drummed harder on the roof as though urging her to breathe quickly, to panic. She swallowed back the sharp edge of fear as she saw the figure stepping out of the patrol car. Captain Richard Hale. Even in the rain, he carried himself like a man who believed the town belonged to him. Broad shoulders under a dark raincoat, pale face half hidden under the brim of his hat, his boots splashing as he walked toward her car. He was more than just another cop. He was the police chief, the one whose name carried weight in every corner of Milford. To most, Hale was untouchable. But to Bianca, sitting alone in her car that night, he was a warning wrapped in flesh. He leaned toward her window, water dripping down the brim of his hat, and gave her a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Evening, Miss Carter," he said, his voice smooth but firm. "Your left taillight's out. Dangerous to be driving like that on a night like this." Bianca's hand tightened around the steering wheel. She had checked her car just that morning before heading to court. Nothing was broken. Nothing was wrong. This wasn't a traffic stop. It was something else. She knew it in her gut, the same way a deer knows when a wolf is circling too close. She forced her voice to stay even. "Captain Hale, with respect, my taillights are fine." For a moment, neither moved. The rain filled the silence, pounding against the car, drowning the space between them. Then she caught movement in her mirror again. Another patrol car had pulled up behind Hale's, this one dark lights off. A shadow stepped out, quieter, less deliberate, almost like he wanted to go unnoticed. Officer Blake, younger, leaner, but with the same coldness in his eyes. He didn't come to the window. Instead, he drifted towards the rear of Bianca's car, one hand resting inside his jacket, the other sliding casually over the wet surface of her trunk. His gaze flicked toward the road, then back at her car, like he was both guarding and hiding something. The air in that moment changed. The storm outside felt less threatening than the silence inside her car. Bianca's chest rose and fell as she fought to steady her breathing. She was one black woman on a deserted street facing two white officers, one with all the authority in town, the other lingering like a shadow waiting to strike. She thought of every story she had read, every client she had defended, whose life had been bent under the weight of a badge and a lie. And now here she was, center stage in a scene she had seen too many times in her work, the woman alone, the officers circling the darkness, swallowing the rest of the world. Hale's voice cut through her thoughts. "Step out of the car, Bianca. Let's take a quick look." Routine. Routine. The word pressed on her chest like a stone. There was nothing routine about being stopped on an empty road in a storm by men who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. Her fingers brushed the leather strap of her purse on the passenger seat where documents lay tucked away, proof leverage, things she had carried from court. Her mind raced, torn between compliance and resistance. Behind her, Blake shifted again. His hand tapped against the edge of her trunk as though waiting for permission to open it. Rain slid off his jacket, and the dim light caught the hard line of his jaw. He looked up, his eyes locking with Hale's for a split second, and Bianca knew. They weren't here because of a broken taillight. They were here because of her. The storm outside roared louder, but it wasn't the rain that made her hands sweat. It was the unmistakable sense that something dark was about to unfold. And in that heavy pause, when time itself seemed to hold its breath, Bianca understood what every bone in her body had been telling her. From the start, this wasn't an accident. This was a setup. "Step out of the car, Miss Carter." Captain Hale's voice carried the same fake politeness as before, but this time it was weighted, almost heavy. His tone tried to sound professional, yet Bianca's eyes were drawn not to his lips, but to his hand. The way it rested, casual but not casual, on the grip of his gun. Like a man who wanted to appear in control while reminding her he didn't need her permission to use force. Bianca's pulse thudded in her ears. She rolled the window down just enough and kept her voice steady, though her hands trembled against the steering wheel. "Unless you have a warrant, Captain, you have no right to search my car. You know that." Her words came sharp, precise, like the arguments she had used in courtrooms. But out here in the storm and the dark, she had no jury to persuade. Hale leaned closer, rain dripping down his coat, his eyes narrowing in mock surprise. "I don't need a warrant if I have probable cause," he said smoothly. "And I do. I smell marijuana, strong enough to justify a search." The words hit Bianca like a slap. She knew the tactic. How many times had she heard it in the cases she fought? The fabricated odor that officers swore gave them the right to turn a life upside down. And now it wasn't just some distant client. It was her. She shook her head, gripping the wheel tighter. "That's a lie. There's nothing in this car." "You know it." But while her voice fought to hold firm, her stomach twisted. Because she could feel the trap tightening inch by inch. Behind her, the shadow of Officer Blake moved. She caught it in her mirror, his slim figure leaning down, his hands working quickly. He wasn't checking her car. He was tampering with it. She squinted through the rain-streaked glass guard, pounding as she saw his hand slip into his jacket and reappear with something small wrapped. A plastic bag. Her breath caught. Blake lifted the trunk as though it were nothing more than routine procedure. The storm roared overhead, masking the sharp rustle of nylon as he bent low and pressed the bag beneath the floor mat. It happened in seconds, fast and deliberate, the kind of move only a man who had done this before could make. Bianca's throat burned. She slammed her palm against the glass and shouted through the rain, "He's planting evidence. Look at what he just did." Her cry cut the storm for a moment. Even Hale froze, then turned his head slowly toward his partner. But instead of shock or denial, his face shifted into a mask of solemn authority, the kind he wore in front of reporters or courtroom benches. A performance. Blake straightened up, already stepping back, as if he had found something rather than left it. His expression blank, professional. Hale, seizing the moment, strode to the rear of the car and with theatrical precision reached inside. Seconds later, he lifted the plastic bag high into the storm. Inside, under the smear of rain and headlights, white powder glistened like something obscene. "Well, well," Hale said loudly, his voice slicing through the downpour, meant to be heard by every invisible witness. "Looks like we've got a serious problem here." His hand tightened around the bag as if it were truth itself, undeniable. His face shifted into grim concern, the expression of a man who had just stumbled upon something terrible when in reality he had orchestrated it from the start. Bianca felt her chest heave. Rage, fear, disbelief all crashing into her at once. "That's not mine," she screamed, her voice raw, tearing through the storm. "He put it there, he planted it," but Hale didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He simply raised the bag higher, turning it toward the body camera clipped to his chest, making sure the world would see what he wanted them to see. The picture of a lawman doing his duty. Blake moved in on her door, now his face a mask of false detachment. Hale gave a nod, and in that instant, Bianca felt the world shift. Her car door was yanked open, the storm crashing against her as cold metal seized her wrists. The cuffs clamped down hard, biting into her skin. She stumbled, water soaking her hair and clothes, her breath ragged. The rain blurred her vision, but not enough to hide the truth. She was being dragged into a nightmare she couldn't reason her way out of. Her eyes darted to Hale. He stood tall, holding the bag, as if it were a prize, his expression carved into stone. To anyone watching, he was the hero who had uncovered drugs on a rainy night. To Bianca, He was the executioner of her dignity, twisting justice into a weapon. The storm raged on, but nothing drowned out the sound of those cuffs locking into place. That metallic click echoed louder than thunder. And in that moment, Bianca Carter, attorney fighter woman, who had spent her life defending others from injustice, stood on the edge of becoming the very thing she had fought against, a victim of the lie. Her body shivered, but it wasn't the rain. It was fury, fury laced with fear, because she knew this was only the beginning. The rain had barely stopped when the morning headlines struck like lightning. Across every screen, every folded newspaper on cafe counters, the words screamed in bold black, defense attorney, arrested with 3 kilos of cocaine. Bianca's name, once respected in courtrooms and whispered in admiration by young law students, was now dragged through the mud for strangers to gawk at. And Captain Richard Hale, oh, he stood right in the center of it all. On the courthouse steps, his uniform pressed his chin, lifted like a savior, posing for history. Cameras flashed, microphones crowded, and Hale gave them exactly what they craved. "We cannot allow drugs to flood our streets," he declared, holding up the very bag he had planted. His voice carried with rehearsed gravitas. "Last night, our department prevented 3 kilograms of poison from reaching the families of Milford. We will not tolerate crime, no matter who commits it." Reporters scribbled, nodding, recording. Some even clapped. They weren't looking at Bianca's ruined life. They were staring at their so-called hero, and the image burned deep, a white captain, praised for keeping order, while the black woman who had fought for justice was paraded as the villain. Inside the county jail, the contrast was suffocating. Bianca Carter was shoved into a cell, her wrists raw from the cuffs, her clothes still damp from the storm. The clang of the metal door echoed like a verdict. The guards barely looked at her as a human being. One smirked, shaking his head. "Guess even the high and mighty lawyers got their secrets, huh?" Another snorted, 3 kilos. Damn, she wasn't just dabbling. She was running the business. Their words cut deeper than chains. These were men who had once nodded respectfully when she passed the courthouse halls. Now they spat her name like a curse. And it wasn't just them. Word traveled fast. Colleagues she had argued cases with, neighbors who had waved from porches, suddenly silence. Phone calls unanswered. Letters never sent. Faces turned away. To them, she wasn't Bianca anymore. She was the scandal, the shame, the headline. Alone in that concrete box, the weight pressed down. At night, lying on the hard cot, she closed her eyes and saw her father's face. Detective Samuel Carter. The man who once wore his badge with pride, who had dug deep into the rot of Milford's police department, refusing to look away. She remembered the way his voice would soften when he said justice isn't about who's loudest, Bianca. It's about who's willing to stand when everyone else runs. But the memory twisted because she also remembered the night he never came home. The whispers that followed, corruption charges, suspension, disgrace. Then weeks later, the official statement, suicide. She had been barely 20. She never believed it. She knew her father too well. The fire in his eyes didn't burn out that way. She always suspected Hale's hand was in it, but she never had proof. Now, staring at the gray ceiling of her cell, the cruel symmetry hit her like a hammer. Her father destroyed by false accusations. Now she, his daughter, branded the same way. The same man still standing tall on courthouse steps, smiling for cameras. Bianca's chest tightened. Her breath came sharp, uneven. She pressed her face into her hands, and the tears spilled hot and heavy. For all her training, for all her courtroom victories, nothing had prepared her for this. The shame, the helplessness, the suffocating thought that the world believed she was no different than the criminals she once defended against injustice. Her sobs filled the cell, echoing against concrete walls that offered no comfort. She cried until her body ached, until her throat was raw. And yet, somewhere in the middle of that flood of despair, a flicker stirred. It was faint, almost fragile. But it was there, the same ember her father carried, the one that hadn't died with him. She lifted her head, eyes swollen, cheeks wet, but her jaw tight. The guards might laugh, the papers might smear her. Hale might bask in the glow of his lies. But deep down, she knew one truth: the fight wasn't over. Not yet. And though the world only saw a broken woman in a cell, the audience could feel it, that flicker of defiance glowing hotter beneath the tears. The storm had knocked her down, yes, but it hadn't extinguished her, because Bianca Carter wasn't built to surrender. The cell was small, damp, and smelled of iron and mildew. Rain still tapped faintly against the barred window, a reminder of the storm that had brought her here. Bianca Carter sat hunched on the narrow cot arms, folded her breath, steady but hollow. She hadn't expected to have a cellmate, but as the guard slammed the door shut, she heard a quiet voice stir from the corner. "You're Bianca Carter, aren't you?" Bianca lifted her head. Across from her sat a woman in her early 40s, her hair tied back, face drawn, but not broken. Her name tag still clipped to her wrinkled scrubs read R. Collins. "Renee," the woman said softly, noticing Bianca's glance. "Renee Collins. I used to be a nurse, until Hale destroyed my life too." Bianca's chest tightened. She leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Renee let out a bitter laugh that never reached her eyes. "2 years ago, I testified against a police officer who beat a young black boy in the ER. Hale said I perjured myself. Next thing I knew, drugs appeared in my locker. 30 years in prison gone. My license gone. My family stopped calling. All because I stood in his way." The words sank deep. Bianca blinked hard, struggling against the sting in her eyes. She wasn't alone. This wasn't chance. Hale had done it before, over and over. In the dim light, their voices dropped to whispers, as if the walls themselves might carry their secrets back to him. "I thought I was the only one," Bianca admitted, "but now it feels like history repeating itself. My father, Detective Samuel Carter, he tried to bring Hale down years ago. They called him corrupt, said he took bribes. A month later, they said he put a gun in his mouth. But I never believed it." Her voice cracked. "He was silenced. And now me too." For a moment, only the dripping pipes answered. Renee moved closer, her eyes steady. "Listen to me," she said. "If Hale is hunting you, it's not because you're weak. It's because you carry something he can't control. He doesn't risk this much unless he's afraid." Bianca met her gaze. Fear Hale. She hadn't thought of it that way. She'd only seen her own downfall headlines smearing her, name-cold stares from old colleagues, the suffocating weight of betrayal. But what if all of this wasn't about her weakness? What if it was about her strength? The cell seemed a little less suffocating. She whispered, "If I give up, then my father died for nothing. Everything he tried to expose, everything he risked, it ends with me buried in here." Renee reached out, resting her hand lightly over Bianca's. "Then don't give up. Don't give him that victory. You survived the storm last night for a reason." For the first time since her arrest, Bianca felt her breathing deep and no longer shallow and ragged. The hopelessness that had pressed down on her chest shifted, making room for something else, something sharp, alive. Her tears dried on her cheeks, leaving behind a strange clarity. She straightened her back, her voice steadier than before. "You're right," she said. "He came after me because he knows I can hurt him. That's why he planted the drugs. That's why he parades me like a trophy. He wants me silenced before I can speak." Renee nodded, eyes burning with the fire of her own scars. "Then speak louder. Make him regret the day he touched your life." Silence fell again, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was charged, waiting. The dripping pipes no longer sounded like chains tightening, but like a metronome keeping rhythm for what was to come. Bianca lay back on the cot, her eyes fixed on the faint slice of moonlight cutting through the bars. The darkness was still there, thick and unforgiving, but for the first time, she didn't feel swallowed by it. Behind those iron bars, Bianca Carter was no longer defeated. She was waiting for her chance to strike back. The visitation room hummed with bad lighting and frayed patients. Metal chairs scraped. Voices floated and fell. Bianca sat at a table bolted to the floor, wrists still sore where the cuffs had kissed bone. She kept her back straight, her face calm, practicing the same poise she wore in court, even if the room smelled nothing like justice. The guard swung the door open. In walked a woman who didn't need a badge to be believed. Short auburn hair, unblinking eyes. A presence that said she'd been told no 1,000 times and kept moving anyway. "Claire Ford," Bianca said, more statement than greeting. Claire took the chair opposite her. No small talk, no pity, just a steady lean, elbows on the table, voice low. "We've been on Hale for years," she said. "Your arrest, this isn't random. It's the missing piece, the final thread we needed." Bianca didn't answer. She knew silence could hold more power than a speech. But the words for years landed with weight. Years of whispers and closed doors. Years of headlines crowning men like Hale as saviors. A thought she'd never dared to say out loud rose anyway. Maybe she hadn't been crazy. Maybe her father hadn't been either. For the first time since the cuffs, hope and terror sat side by side in her chest, arguing over which one would breathe next. Claire watched the shift in Bianca's eyes and let the smallest hint of warmth through. "Hold on," she said. "This isn't over for you or for him." The visit ended the way prison visits always do, too soon cut clean. But when the guard led Bianca away, she carried something new with her. Not proof, not yet. A promise. Miles outside the city, down a road that remembered more summers than people, Leah Carter drove toward an old cabin with a stubborn heart. Bianca's little sister had her own way of being brave, quieter, but no less firm. The cabin sat where their father had liked it best, at the edge of water, in the company of trees far enough from town to hear himself think. The porch moaned when she stepped on it. Inside, stale air and dust motes welcomed her like familiar ghosts. She took her time, searched the way she had seen him search when she was a girl, patient, thorough, trusting that answers lived in corners no one bothered to look at. Before she reached the back room, a memory slipped in the smell of cedar and engine oil, her father in a flannel rain, ticking on the tin roof. "If anything ever happens to me, trust the work, not the rumors," he'd said, the sideways smile. For a moment, the place felt less abandoned, as if he were still standing guard. Leah's foot caught on metal half buried beneath a sagging shelf. She knelt, dragged out a small steel box, and brushed away years. The lid resisted, then gave. Inside lay a flash drive, a stack of handwritten notes, and a sealed envelope thick enough to make her pulse jump. She slit the envelope carefully. The title on the first page hit like a bell: Federal Warrant. Old date, fresh sting. Her eyes scanned down and froze on a name she already hated: Captain Richard Hale, listed among targets in an investigation that never saw daylight. Her back slid down the wall. Paper crinkled against her chest. The truth hadn't been lost after all. It had been waiting. That evening, Leah found Claire in a narrow office lined with file boxes and burnt coffee. Claire plugged the flash drive in and said nothing while the screen filled with numbers that had long tried to hide. Bank records, wire transfers, offshore accounts with names designed to blur, and dates too neat to be coincidence. Every time Hale staged a victory, every time cameras caught him lifting a bag of contraband, a deposit winked into a quiet account overseas. Claire leaned back and tapped the warrant packet with a knuckle. "Sealed and never served," she said. "They buried the case, not the evidence. Legally, it can be reactivated. More importantly, it proves federal eyes were already on Hale. This isn't rumor, Leah. It's a paper trail with teeth. We use it to force a judge to listen." Leah's throat tightened. "So Dad wasn't keeping secrets from us," she whispered. "He was keeping proof safe." "Exactly." Claire's tone was flint-striking steel. "Your father was closing in. Someone shut the door on him. We're opening it again." They worked in a rhythm that didn't need music. Claire photographed each page, logged each note, mirrored the flash drive twice. Leah read and reread her father's handwriting until the loops and slants steadied her breathing. In the margins, Samuel Carter had left more than figures. He left warnings, patterns, names of officers who rose when others fell, streets where raids always happened before election weeks. The kind of details that don't make headlines, but build cases. "Look here," Claire said, sliding a ledger across. "This transfer lands 48 hours after the arrest of a community organizer who'd sued the department. In this one," she pointed to a second entry, "same week a nurse gets charged at the hospital, Renee Collins." Leah's jaw set. The story was no longer a line. It was a net, and it had caught more than one life. "What do we do first?" she asked. "We protect the evidence," Claire said. "2 encrypted backups go out tonight to a federal prosecutor I trust, and to a judge who hates being lied to. We hold the originals, and we prepare to show a courtroom something it can't unsee." Leah nodded, clutching the warrant as if it might try to leave. "When Bianca hears this, she needs to hear it," Claire said gently. "Hope is a kind of oxygen, especially in a cell." Back in the jail, the fluorescent hum was the same, the metal the same, but Bianca's pulse had a new tempo. She replayed Claire's words until they settled into her bones. Years, missing piece, not over. When the guard glanced away, Bianca let herself imagine the cabin, wood and water, the way her father's boots had sounded on the boards. She pictured Leah there, stubborn as a sunrise, finding a box no one else would have found, opening it with shaking hands. Across time and distance, it felt like a relay. one hand passing the baton to another. Samuel to Leah, Leah to Claire, Claire back to Bianca. The shape of a fight that belonged to a family, not just one woman left alone in the storm. The audience wouldn't need a narrator to explain it. They could feel it gathering. Bianca's arrest wasn't the end of her story, it was leverage. The flash drive wasn't just data, it was a fuse. And the federal warrant wasn't a relic, it was a live wire that could light the whole room. Bianca closed her eyes and let a breath settle low and steady. The headlines could say what they wanted. The guards could smirk. Hale could smile for cameras. Somewhere beyond these walls, her father's work was waking up. The Carter name had been buried once. Not this time. Not anymore. By morning, the storm had cleared, and Milford pretended to be clean again. On every TV, Captain Richard Hale looked straight into the camera, shoulders squared, voice warm enough to pass for comfort. "We do everything we can to keep this city safe," he said. "We take no joy in arrests. We take responsibility." People nodded in living rooms and diners. He wore the word protector like a custom suit. But behind a closed office door, blinds drawn tight, his tone shed its polish. "Anyone who touches me pays," Hale muttered, not to the room so much as to himself. Officer Blake stood near the file cabinet, hands behind his back, eyes on the floor. Hale didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Find the leak, make it hurt. In the jail, the fluorescent lights hummed like a warning. Bianca shuffled forward with the noon line tray in hand when a woman she didn't recognize stepped across her path, chin high, eyes hard. "Big shot lawyer," the woman said, just loud enough. "You don't belong here. Prove it." A guard watched, then looked away. Bianca's heart thudded once hard. She took a breath, tried to keep moving. A shoulder checked her sharp, deliberate. The tray tilted, metal-clattered food slapped the concrete. The woman moved again, quicker this time. "Hey," Renee snapped, appearing between them like a wall. "Pick on someone who didn't save your tail last month." The woman flinched. The moment deflated. The guard finally strolled over, shrugged at the mess, and walked on. Message delivered. Bianca pressed her palm to the throbbing in her ribs and met Renee's eyes. "That wasn't random," Bianca said, voice low. "No," Renee answered. "It was a memo from upstairs." Hale's reach felt longer than the hallway. That night, miles from the jail, Leah and Claire parked a battered sedan 2 blocks from a corrugated warehouse by the river. The place looked like it had been abandoned by the honest part of the city a long time ago. A single sodium lamp buzzed over a loading dock. Men came and went, and shadows' faces turned just enough to avoid light. Claire checked a tiny camera clipped to her jacket and handed Leah a pair of earbuds. "If someone says your name, we walk," she said. "If they say mine, we run." Leah swallowed and nodded. "We get plates, faces, hands, envelopes. Everything that breathes." Exactly. They moved like they belonged to the dark, no sudden bravado, no heroics, just patience. From a line of stacked pallets, Leah framed Hale in the camera's window as he stepped out of a black SUV. He wasn't in uniform tonight. No badge, just a man in an expensive coat flanked by 2 officers they'd seen before. A third man brought a duffel. The exchange wasn't dramatic. That was the point. No words that meant anything. Just the quiet choreography of people who'd done this many times. Hale peeled open the bag and lifted a handful of envelopes, the kind that make people forget their principles. He didn't smile. Men like him didn't smile during payment. They saved it for interviews. "Got it," Leah whispered, breath fogging in the cold. Envelope count faces timestamps. Claire's camera caught plates as cars rolled through the spill of light. A license number here, a distinctive bumper sticker there. Enough to stitch together a pattern that had always been present but never seen. Then the night twitched. Headlights swung wide, washing the pallets for a half-second too long. A man on the dock shaded his eyes, peered past the glare, and pointed first at the stack, then at them. North fence, someone barked. Claire didn't wait to see if he meant it. "Walk," she said through her teeth. Now, they walked fast enough to leave, slow enough not to advertise panic, until a shout broke the calm and boots hit concrete. Running found them all at once. "Go!" Claire snapped. They cut behind a dumpster, slid along a chain-link fence, and burst into the alley. Footsteps pounded behind them. A hand grabbed Leah's backpack strap and yanked. The seam tore with a sound that made her stomach drop. The bag jerked free into someone else's hands. "My bag." Leah gasped. Claire shoved her forward. "Keep moving." They tore around the corner toward the car. The sedan coughed once before the starter caught. Leah's fingers shook on the keys. In the rearview mirror, two figures spilled into the mouth of the alley, one waving the backpack like a trophy. Claire's jaw tightened. "We just lost something," she said, knuckles white on the dash. Leah swallowed against the rising heat in her throat. The backpack held their field notes, a spare battery, and a USB drive. For 3 agonizing blocks, the only sound in the car was the engine and Leah's ragged breath. Then she reached under her jacket, slid a slender lanyard from against her skin, and held up a smaller drive, plain ugly taped like a child's secret. "Decoys in the bag," she said. "The real copy isn't." Claire exhaled once sharp. "Good. But what about the warehouse video? The stream didn't push. Metal siding killed the signal." Leah glanced at her cracked phone. The screen still glowed, a little bar frozen at 96%. "It queued," she said. "As soon as we hit service, it should a soft chime." Leah opened the encrypted app with her thumbprint. The upload ticked to 100%, then flashed green mirrored to 2 remote vaults. Claire allowed herself half a smile. "Your father would be proud of your paranoia." Leah huffed out something like a laugh and a sob. "Yours taught me most of it." They didn't stop until they were 2 neighborhoods away under a sick streetlight that had seen better Thursdays. Claire checked the pen camera's cache on her laptop. The plates and faces were there. Leah pulled the lanyard off her neck and dropped the real USB into a fireproof pouch, then tucked it into the hollow under the spare tire. "Redundancy," Claire said, voice steady again. "If they think they won, they get sloppy." Leah stared at the empty passenger seat where her backpack should have been and let the fear drain like rainwater through a grate. For a minute back there, the story had been the worst version. Evidence gone, hope gone, the same old ending repeating itself. But not tonight. Back at the warehouse, men would be celebrating with the wrong bag. In the jail, a guard would report a minor incident that was anything but. On local TV, Hale would rehearse another line about safety and families and the burden of leadership. And somewhere between all those lies, a different truth was taking shape, harder to see, harder to stop. Bianca didn't know it yet, but the fuse had burned past the halfway mark. The city still believed in Hale's smile. He still believed in his own untouchable myth. That faith, his and theirs, was the most fragile thing in Milford. It just didn't know it was breaking. Leah found Officer Alex Vega where no one was supposed to notice anyone, behind a strip mall laundromat, the hum of dryers doubling as cover. He stood half in uniform, half out, duty jacket over a gray hoodie cap pulled low. A man trying to be 2 things at once. "I shouldn't be here," he said, eyes on the wet asphalt, not on her. "If I talk, I lose my badge. Maybe more than that." Leah didn't step closer. She let the quiet sit a second, then answered the way her sister would have, steady, not cruel. "If you stay silent, you'll live as an accomplice. You know what you saw." Vega's jaw worked. He glanced up and the fight in his face flickered, duty versus conscience, paycheck versus pillow. "I saw Blake at your sister's trunk," he said finally, hand in his jacket, then under the mat. "I reported the irregularity," and he stopped himself and laughed once without humor. "Internal logs got scrubbed the next day." "So why call me?" Leah asked. "Because I made a copy before they wiped it," he said. From his pocket, he pulled a small drive wrapped in electrical tape. Segment from the dash unit and the lot camera. "It's not perfect, but it's clear enough to end a career. Maybe more." Leah didn't reach for it yet. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing that makes headlines," Vega said. "You don't say my name until there's a judge in the room and I've got counsel. My wife, she didn't sign up for this. And if you miss your shot, if this gets buried, I'm finished." Leah nodded. "We don't miss. Not this time." He slid the drive into her palm like contraband in a prison yard. "I watched Hale tonight at the docks," he added almost to himself. "Envelopes, the same faces like it was payroll. I kept telling myself it wasn't my fight." "But your sister?" He shook his head. "She's the one person in this town who kept showing up for people like me. I can't keep my head down and live with myself." Leah tucked the drive beneath her jacket. "You won't have to." They left in opposite directions, 2 shadows splitting a wider dark. In the jail, night count dragged like a bad song. Bianca stood at the bars while a guard ticked boxes and mispronounced names. When the door clanged shut again, Renee leaned in, voice low. They posted a transport notice on D Block, she whispered. Your number's on it. Bianca felt the floor tilt. Transport where State Renee said. 6 a.m. They're calling it high risk. A different guard ambled by, eyes sliding off them like oil. Bianca kept her voice even. My hearing's here. Trial docket's here. Renee's look said what Bianca already knew procedures bend for the powerful. 10 minutes later, a knock on the glass of the attorney booth. Claire's face on the other side, pale with the kind of anger that makes people precise, not loud. They're using a loophole, Claire said the second the phone connected. High-risk transfer classification. Check one box and you can move a pre-trial inmate to state for security reasons without a hearing. Once you're there, you're a ghost until someone forces the paperwork back. Bianca's breath came slow measured. Accidents happen in state. That's the point, Claire said. We're filing an emergency motion before dawn. Leah's on her way with a witness drive. We'll wake a judge if we have to. Bianca closed her eyes for half a beat, felt the panic try to climb and refused to hand it a foothold. Then we make it to dawn. Renee was waiting when Bianca stepped back into the tier. Well, they want me gone before the truth walks in, Bianca said. We're going to be faster. Leah, meanwhile, drove with both hands at 10 and 2, the little taped drive warm against her skin. At a red light, she called Claire on speaker voice, steady but quick. I've got a copy from Vega. Blake at the trunk. You'll see the hand off the tuck. It's enough. We'll mirror it in 3 places, Claire said. If Hale sneezes near our files, he'll catch pneumonia. Leah almost smiled. How bad is the transfer? Bad, Claire answered. If they get her on that bus, she disappears into a calendar we don't control. We need a judge in order and a spotlight before 6. Leah looked at the dash clock. 2:17 a.m. The highway unfurled like a dare. Then we don't lift our foot, she said. Not until we're in front of someone who can say no. The urgency wrapped itself around every scene like plastic. In the warehouse district, men counted envelopes and congratulated themselves on stealing the wrong bag. In the chief's office, Hale practiced sincerity in a dark window, rehearsing lines about families and safety and the weight of leadership. In a cramped apartment, Officer Vega sat on the edge of his bed, hands on his knees, listening to the quiet and choosing not to take it back. And in the jail, Bianca lay with her eyes open, refusing to blink first. She could hear Renee's breathing in the bunk above and the slow drip of a pipe that never got fixed. 6 a.m. wasn't morning anymore. It was a deadline. The city still believed Hale was the cure, not the disease. But the remedy was changing shape piece by piece, names, numbers, a warrant with teeth, and now a video no one could unsee. If Dawn came with the right papers, Bianca would still be here to fight. If it didn't, the story would have to fight without her. Either way, the lie had been caught on tape. And lies have a way of breaking when the sun comes up. Night in the jail stretches different when dawn comes with a bus. Bianca lay awake counting pipes and breaths until Renee's whisper slipped down from the top bunk. You still here? I'm here, Bianca said. Then softer, the thing that she'd refused to say all day. If I don't make it out, tell it for me. Don't let them write the ending. Renee reached through the bars of the bunk and found her hand. Truth doesn't die, she said. People do. Paper burns. Truth waits. We'll carry it. The words didn't erase fear. They made room around it. Across town, a lamp burned over a table cluttered with copies and coffee rings. Leah stood between Claire and Officer Vega's shoulders squared, eyes raw from no sleep. On the table, 2 laptops, a portable printer, the pen camera cache, and a thick envelope sealed years ago by a man who refused to quit. 3 prongs, Claire said, voice steady as a metronome. 1 emergency motion to stay the transfer filed before 5. 2 notice to the press so Hale can't suffocate this in the dark. 3 9 a.m. open court, we play the video and put the federal warrant on the record. Vega kept to the edge of the light cap low. I'll sign a sworn declaration, he said. You don't use my name in public until a judge is in the room and I've got counsel. If this goes sideways, my wife packs a bag. It won't, Leah said. He's taken enough from our family. Claire slid forms across the table. Chain of custody on the drive. I'll certify the warrant packet and attach your father's notes as exhibits. No gaps. The printer rattled. Leah broke the seal on the envelope like it might breathe. Federal warrant rang from the title in her hands. Old date, fresh sting. She slipped it into a rigid sleeve, then a leather portfolio. The way you put a photograph back into a frame after cleaning the glass. Filed under seal, never served, Claire said, tapping the packet. They buried the case, not the document. It proves federal eyes were already on Hale. Paper with a memory makes judges listen. Leah tucked a second USB into her boot. Redundancy, Vega asked. Paranoia, Leah said. Inherited. A corner of Claire's mouth lifted. Your father would approve. On the tier, the air thinned with a special kind of casual, the kind that means decisions were made someplace else. Bianca sat on the edge of the bunk, laces double-knotted, eyes on the door. Renee checked the corridor, then Bianca's face. When they come, Renee said, keep your spine. If they put you on that bus, I'll talk to every badge and camera in this county. If they don't, Bianca said, save me a front row. Keys rang. Boots, a clipboard. Carter, a guard called. On your feet. They walked her toward the sally port. The hallway smelled like disinfectant and old soda. Every step sounded louder than it should. A sergeant lifted a radio. Static. Then a voice from upstairs. Hold transport on Carter. Court fax to stay pending emergency hearing. Do not move the inmate. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Relief didn't wash Bianca. It measured her. Stays vanish. Judges blink. But the bus wouldn't swallow her before the sun. Back to holding, the sergeant said, irritated by a rule he couldn't bully. Bianca found Renee through the mesh and lifted her chin one notch. Renee lifted hers back. Front row, her eyes said. In the courthouse basement, a clerk slid stamped packets across the counter. Claire took them without flourish. Emergency stay granted. Immediate hearing set, she said to Leah. We serve the sheriff and the department now. Leah stepped into the hall phone to her ear. Ms. Khan, press pool only. 9 a.m. Courtroom 3. Evidence will be displayed in open session video and a federal warrant naming Hale. Yes, you'll want cameras. She ended the call and pressed the portfolio to her side. For a blink, she felt 12 again. Rain on a tin roof, her father's palm on her head, then 30 again, built by a harder storm. How long until they try something else, Leah asked. As long as it takes us to get louder, Claire said. So we don't stop. Dawn rinsed the edges of Milford. The jail lights flickered tired gold. Bianca sat with her back straight and her pulse calm on purpose. Across town, Leah stood on the courthouse steps with the portfolio under her arm and her sister's name in her mouth. Claire beside her, Vega 2 paces back, courage higher than he planned. They had a video no one could unsee. They had a warrant with teeth. And for the first time since the storm, they had something Hale couldn't fake time enough to bring the truth into daylight. Courtroom 3 overflowed, press row jammed with tripods, locals standing 2 deep along the wood paneling, microphones blooming like weeds. Judge Eleanor Price took the bench with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. District Attorney Howard Briggs rose first, shoulders squared to the cameras. Your Honor, this is simple, he began, holding up a clear evidence bag like a lantern. 3 kilos seized from the defendant's vehicle. Chain of custody intact. Intent to distribute open and shut. When Bianca's lawyer started to speak, Judge Price lifted a palm. Counsel, save the theatrics. Then, almost as an afterthought, Ms. Carter, you will remain silent unless addressed. Bianca stood anyway. Her voice was even. I'll speak for myself, Your Honor. The truth doesn't need theatrics. A ripple moved through the room. Price's mouth tightened. You have 2 minutes. Bianca turned not to the cameras but to the jury box that would be filled one day. What happened on that road wasn't a discovery, it was a performance. And performances leave fingerprints. From the second row, Leah slid a small drive into Claire's hand. Claire walked it to the clerk like it might explode. A screen lowered with a mechanical breath. Lights dimmed. The frame snapped to life. Rain of patrol, cars washed the rear of Bianca's Honda. Officer Blake leaned into the shot hand, dipping into his jacket, then under the trunk mat. A quick tuck, a step back. The lid closed. The picture didn't blink. Gasps dotted the room. Someone in press row whispered, "Oh my God," loud enough to be recorded. Briggs lunged for an objection he couldn't find. Judge Price frowned at the screen as if it had broken her script. From the aisle, Captain Hale didn't move at first. Then he set his jaw. That's doctored, he called loud enough for the microphones. I've kept this city safe for 20 years. Bianca didn't look at him. Captain, she said you forgot something. She reached into the leather portfolio Leah had carried up the steps and lifted a packet sealed long before last night. The title hit the room like a bell, federal warrant. Claire handed it to the clerk. The clerk handed it to Judge Price. Price read the caption, then the target name. Something small shifted in her face. Filed under seal. Claire said for the record. Never served. Federal interest in Captain Richard Hale predating Ms. Carter's arrest. Cameras clicked like hail. Hale's forehead bloomed with sweat he didn't have time to wipe. Your Honor, Briggs tried again, voice thinner. We object to? To the truth, Bianca asked, calm as a held breath. The back door opened. A deputy ushered Renee Collins forward, orange jumpsuit stark against oak. She took the oath with a steady hand. I was accused of stealing narcotics from the hospital, she said, eyes on the judge. Evidence appeared that didn't exist the day before. The man who signed the report was Captain Hale. Briggs sputtered. Anecdote, Your Honor. It's a pattern, Renee answered. Mine wasn't the only life he broke. Silence found the room and stayed. On the screen, Blake's hand hovered forever under the trunk mat. In the judge's hands, the warrant weighed more than paper. In the second row, Leah's knuckles were white around nothing at all. Bianca let the quiet do what words couldn't. Then she spoke, not loud but final. This is not a case about a bag. It's about a badge used as a weapon. The video shows the act. Ms. Collins shows the method. The warrant shows the history. Price looked from the screen to the packet to Hale. When she spoke, the bench was steel. The court stays all proceedings against Ms. Carter pending referral to federal authorities. The evidence regarding Captain Hale is preserved and transmitted. Captain, you will remain available to this court. The room moved, first a murmured wave, then a roar. Briggs sank into his chair. Hale tried to stand taller and only looked smaller. Three things hung in the air like verdicts already spoken, a video no one could unsee, a witness who refused to disappear, and a federal warrant with teeth. The tide had turned. The gavel hadn't fallen yet, but everyone in courtroom 3 could hear it coming. The verdict came swift, Bianca Carter. Not guilty. Applause broke out as federal agents stepped forward, cuffing Captain Hale on the spot. Headlines flared, the biggest police scandal in the state's history. The fallout spread fast. Judge Eleanor Price resigned, D.A. Briggs faced investigation, and officers tied to Hale's schemes were pulled down with him. Old cases reopened. Renee and others finally walked free, their names restored. Days later, Bianca and Leah stood before their father's grave. Bianca whispered, Daddy, justice never stopped. It just took time. Leah clasped her hands, silent but strong. Then Claire arrived with new news, another network in the next county. Bianca lifted her gaze, calm yet unyielding. Justice, she knew, was not a finish line. It was a road they were still walking. If this story stayed with you, let it stand for something bigger, truth that refuses to be buried, courage that shows up when it's hardest, and justice that moves because ordinary people won't look away. Bianca's fight reminds us that accountability is possible and that family, community, and persistence can outlast fear. If it resonated, please like this video, share the story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Mr. Mac Stories for more meaningful narratives. Your support truly fuels our small creative team. It helps us research deeply, write with care, and keep bringing real heart to every episode.